just go on and play. And I can't practice, so it's always constantly, what do you call it, like a jam, you know. It's hard for me to remember any notes because I'm constantly trying to create other things. That's why I make a lot of mistakes.
In the short but incandescent span of his life, Jimi Hendrix redefined the possibilities of the electric guitar with an artistry that was both unearthly and deeply rooted in tradition. His performances were an exploration of sound itself, wringing emotions from his instrument in a way that seemed almost supernatural. Yet for all his sonic innovation and flamboyant stage presence, Hendrix remained, at heart, a musician humbled by those who had come before him.
Because like what I was trying to do, was do a today's type of blues, like manic depression and so forth.
He was a man who looked up to others even as he towered above them in his own right. It is easy, in the wake of his untimely death in 1970, to see Hendrix as a singular phenomenon, a force of nature who existed in his own creative vacuum.
He just played his arse off, basically. When the first time I saw Eric, I thought, wow, there's a master guitar player, but Eric was a guitar player. Jimmy was some sort of force of nature.
The reality, however, was quite different. Hendrix was a lifelong student of music, someone who absorbed influences voraciously and who frequently paid tribute to those he admired. He spoke often of the artists who inspired him, musicians whose work shaped his own approach and provided the foundations upon which he built his revolutionary sound. There were 5 in particular who left an indelible mark on him, figures who, in one way or another, helped forge the legacy that would make Hendrix immortal. One of the more unexpected influences on Hendrix was the progressive rock outfit King Crimson. A band whose intricate compositions and avant-garde approach to rock music seemed, on the surface, to be worlds apart from Hendrix's raw blues-inspired playing. Yet he was deeply moved by their ability to stretch the boundaries of musical structure and texture. The story of Hendrix's admiration for King Crimson is well documented, with Robert Fripp, the band's guitarist, recalling the night they met in 1969. Hendrix, having attended one of their performances, was effusive in his praise, reaching out to Fripp with the memorable line, "Hey, shake my left hand, man, it's closer to my heart." Fripp later recounted how Hendrix had been so overcome by the performance that he could hardly contain his excitement, shouting to those around him, "This is the best group in the world."
And after the first set, we went to the band area downstairs, and the man came up to me, and he was dressed in a white suit, and his right arm was in a sling. And his characteristic was of luminosity. He shone. And he came up. "Shake my left hand, man. It's closer to my heart." This was Jimi Hendrix.
What drew Hendrix to King Crimson was their willingness to experiment, to approach music without boundaries or preconceptions. There was a kinship between them, despite their stylistic differences, rooted in a shared belief that music was not meant to be confined by conventional forms.
Food, cat, food, I'll get him!
Hendrix's interest in their work underscored his own restless creativity, his refusal to settle into a predictable pattern or to coast on his prodigious talent. He was always searching, always reaching for something beyond what he had already achieved. If King Crimson represented the future of rock music, the Beatles embodied its present, a force so ubiquitous in the 1960s that it would have been impossible for Hendrix not to be influenced by them in some way.
Don't let me down!
More than their success, it was their willingness to experiment and evolve that captured his imagination. Hendrix admired their ability to reinvent themselves with each new release, to push their music in unexpected directions while maintaining a sense of authenticity. The Beatles' influence on Hendrix was never more evident than in his famous rendition of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which he performed live in London just 3 days after the album's release. It was a bold move, one that might have backfired had he not executed it with such effortless confidence. Paul McCartney, who was in attendance that night, later recalled his astonishment at the performance. "Jimmy was a sweetie, a very nice guy. He must have been so into it," McCartney said, "because normally it might take a day for rehearsal and then you might wonder whether you'd put it in, but he just opened with it." Hendrix's relationship with the Beatles was not merely one of passive admiration. He found in them a spirit of adventure that mirrored his own, a willingness to take risks and defy expectations. He was particularly critical of the manufactured nature of bands like the Monkees, once remarking, "I'm so embarrassed that America could be so stupid as to make somebody like that."
Hey, we're the monkeys, and people say we monkey around.
For Hendrix, authenticity was everything, and the Beatles, with their ever-evolving artistry, represented the kind of genuine creativity he aspired to. If the Beatles offered Hendrix a template for artistic reinvention, Bob Dylan provided him with a masterclass in lyrical storytelling. Hendrix often spoke of his admiration for Dylan's songwriting, of the way his lyrics captured the essence of human experience with an economy of words that was both profound and poetic.
Like a complete unknown, like a rolling stone.
All those people who don't like Bob Dylan's songs should read his lyrics, Hendrix once said. They are filled with the joys and sadness of life. Dylan's influence on Hendrix extended beyond mere admiration. It gave him the confidence to explore his own voice as a songwriter, even if he often doubted his abilities in that regard. "He doesn't inspire me, actually," Hendrix admitted, "because I could never write the kind of words he does, but he's helped me out in trying to write about 2 or 3 words because I got 1,000 songs that will never be finished." Dylan's work demonstrated to Hendrix that lyrics could be as powerful as the music itself, that words could carry as much weight as a guitar solo.
Here's the story of the hurricane, the man the authorities came to name.
It was inevitable, perhaps, that Hendrix would eventually record his own interpretation of Dylan's All Along the Watchtower, a version that would become so iconic that even Dylan himself conceded its superiority. He took some small songs of mine that nobody paid any attention to and brought them up into the outer limits of the stratosphere, Dylan said with a smile. It was a rare instance in which Hendrix allowed himself to borrow so heavily from another artist, yet in doing so, he made the song his own, transforming it into a swirling, apocalyptic masterpiece that remains one of his most enduring recordings. If Dylan represented the lyrical side of Hendrix's influences, Cream embodied the raw, visceral power of blues-based rock. The London trio, led by Eric Clapton, were instrumental in shaping the sound of the late 1960s, blending blues, rock, and psychedelia into a potent mix that Hendrix found irresistible.
What if we do Sunshine? Is that satisfying?
The mutual admiration between Hendrix and Cream was evident from their first meeting, with Clapton famously inviting Hendrix to join them on stage for an impromptu performance that left a lasting impression. Hendrix's respect for Cream was so profound that when the band announced their breakup in 1969, he took it upon himself to honor them in the most fitting way possible. During a live BBC performance, he interrupted his set to dedicate a song to them, saying, "We'd like to stop playing this rubbish and dedicate a song to the Cream." The ensuing performance of Sunshine of Your Love was both a tribute and a statement, an acknowledgement of what Cream had achieved, and a reminder that their influence would endure.
We'd like to stop playing this rubbish and dedicate a song to the Cream, regardless of what kind of group they might be in. We'd like to dedicate it to Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker, and Jack Bruce.
But if there was one artist who loomed largest in Hendrix's personal mythology, it was Muddy Waters. The father of electric blues, Waters' music was the bedrock upon which Hendrix built his own sound. The first guitarist I was aware of was Muddy Waters, Hendrix once said. I heard one of his old records when I was a little boy, and it scared me to death. Hendrix's playing was often described as otherworldly, but at its core was the raw emotional depth he learned from Waters. The blues, in all its simplicity and power, formed the heart of his music. even as he pushed the boundaries of what could be done with an electric guitar, layering effects and distortion to create entirely new sonic landscapes, the essence of the blues remained in his playing. Ultimately, these 5 artists, King Crimson, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Cream and Muddy Waters, each contributed a vital piece to the puzzle that was Jimi Hendrix. They were his teachers, his inspirations, and, in some cases, his friends. Yet, as with everything he touched, Hendrix took what he learned from them and made it uniquely his own. He was not content to merely imitate or pay homage. He absorbed their influence and used it as a launchpad for his own limitless creativity. Even now, decades after his death, the echoes of these influences can still be heard in Hendrix's recordings. They remind us that genius, no matter how singular it may seem, is always built upon the foundations laid by those who came before.